The 2020 election is probably one of the most crucial elections that we've ever been faced with. When I tell you guys that right now our country is in so much turmoil, we're facing so many different hardships, and it's important that each and every one of us gets up and go out and vote. Don't say you're gonna do it. I need you to get up and go and do it, because we have a person in office right now who is not really for the people. And either y'all want to continue with this for another 4 years, or y'all want to stop and make a difference right here and right now. Because what I can promise y'all is that if Donald Trump is reelected again for another 4 years, we're going downhill. We're going downhill. It's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Everything is going to go downhill. So I need y'all to really pay attention to everything that I'm saying. This election is the most crucial. It's really critical that we get up and we get out and we vote. And today we're joined here by DC politician Jamal Holtz, who's going to talk to us about the election, why it's important for us to vote, why every vote matters and it counts, and why we cannot sleep on this election as a whole.
Yeah, no, I very much appreciate that. Like you said, this election right now is critical. It's a fight for humanity, is what I always say, and I think oftentimes we spend too much time thinking about what the politics look like in these elections, and I think right now we have to spend time thinking about what the humanity looks like, is that human lives are at risk. We're in a time in our lives where we're in a pandemic that's killing people. We're in a pandemic where folks are losing their jobs, and people have to face the brunt of trying to figure out what's gonna happen next week with their homes and how they're gonna feed their kids. We're seeing gun violence in our nation, where Black and brown communities are being torn apart by illegal guns and guns that we're failing to address from a policy standpoint. And we're seeing things happening in our nation that are literally affecting everyday humans. And I think we're ignoring that. We've ignored it for too long. We're seeing Black communities being tortured by police. And these are all things that we can see progress in if we had the proper policy and people leading the realm. So when you talk about how critical this election is, it's critical because it's a fight for humanity and fight for human rights. Just like all of our shirts read right now, it's about registering, it's about showing up, and it's about voting. We aren't doing those things, and we're failing each other. So that's the importance of what 2020 is.
Do you think that people took, because right now Donald Trump, he is the current president, do you think that people took the privilege for granted 4 years ago when it came to voting, that they didn't really believe that it was going to happen, or it was a joke? Like, what's your take on that?
Well, it's a mix. I think you had a lot of people who had a belief that Hillary Clinton was already going to be president just because people thought Donald Trump was a joke. I still believe he's a joke. And you had a mix of that, but you also had a mix of systemic oppression and systemic racism happening at the voting polls, right? Where you had people in towns and cities where the voting lines were 4 hour long, where votes weren't counted from entering it in manually, where at times people just didn't show up to vote because they just didn't want to wait. But also you had the system that oppressed a lot of people. Like, we have this thing called an electoral college, right? If my belief is that as a young person, me going in to vote, and the 2016 election definitely is an election that really made a lot of people not believe in government anymore. When you see that Hillary Clinton won from a popular vote and yet still lost the election, there's a systemic problem that exists that we're failing to address. And to me, that's the electoral college, right? If the people can't choose who their president is, but a bunch of electors who come together and some of them don't really have a pulse on what the people want, can choose who's their leader for next year, that's a problem. So all of those things combined, from the systemic oppression to what we see, to what the narrative that people believed in, that led to us where we are now, to have a person named Donald Trump in office.
So Jamal, when you say that as well, you have us who may vote, as a community or around the world, then you have the folks that may come in and vote, or more so choose that person to be in office, right? Would you say in some aspects that, for those who know that already, in that aspect, now why should I go vote if I'm going to make a decision but I'm not really making a decision for who's in office because ultimately it won't matter. What would you say to those folks?
Well, what I say is that it does matter, and like every system, the people run it, and I think that's the importance of voting. So when you look at the Electoral College and why we failed is because primarily you had the small towns and small cities that didn't bring out enough people to vote, right? That didn't flip that district or didn't necessarily flip it in a way that played in our advantage. So what we see is that oftentimes with politics, like we spend too much time thinking about what's the best look or who's gonna look the best rather than like who's gonna serve the people the best. And we gotta start putting, I say this all the time, is that we gotta start putting people over party. Is that for far too long we've been putting party over people. Is that your basic rights to being a human should be granted to you just from your existence as a person. If I'm living every day and it's hard for me to find housing or get health care or get treated, like my mom alone took her a month to get a doctor's appointment because of the health insurance that she had, right? Like those are basic human things that are killing humans that the government has failing to address. So what I say to people is that if we want to keep fighting, just like any fight, and when you're fighting for issues, that you got to keep fighting, you got to keep being persistent, and history will prevail. So when people talk to me about, well, why should I vote if my vote obviously wouldn't matter? It does matter because you have to think about the issues that affect you, and it starts locally. The electors that we see that are the Electoral College, that's local government. That's county commissioners, that's mayors, that's city council members. Those are people that make the decision on your behalf. That you engrave the trust in to serve you. And even greater than that, after you vote, it's the accountability piece. Right? We got to continue to hold out folks accountable. People we elect, we got to hold them accountable.
What about in the sense of a different point of view? Like you have certain people who say, yes, Trump is bad, right? And but what about if they bring up the point of, it doesn't matter if we elect Trump or Biden, it's two white men in the office, and we've seen times and times again, doesn't matter what these white men promise, they still neglect the black community. Now, I would say it out loud. I can't stand Trump. We can all agree he's a clown. Yes. I do want all of you guys to go vote. I am not taking a beating for the next 4 years. I honestly don't know how he won 4 years ago, but my question is, because they do make a valid point. Doesn't matter who we elect, in a sense of viewpoint, it's another white man in the office and another white man that could ignore the black community.
Yeah, and I think that's a part of the accountability piece, but that's also part of changing the systems. That we live in a system designed to oppress black, right? Yes. When you look at police brutality that's been happening and everything, that's literally a fight for equity. Like police, you know the history of police, like the history was to literally to catch slaves, right? To catch people who look like us. And those things, it migrates through history. The other thing that I say is that a part of the accountability piece is also empowering yourself to lead on the issue that you care most about. Is that you can come to me with an issue you're fighting for because you have that personal connection to it, right? When I talk about affordable housing, when I talk about employment or economic prosperity, when I talk about the issues that I care most about, those are issues that are affecting my life. Those are things that I wouldn't be fighting for if I didn't at least have a pulse on what it meant, right? So what we got to start getting our politicians to understand is that you can't ever negate what someone's life experience is, and that we got to start thinking about life and humanity. I continue to say that is because that's literally what it is. That's what the government's sole purpose is to serve people, right? And if we're going to serve people, we have to serve their needs. So that piece on we're putting people in office that doesn't reflect us or doesn't reflect our values, then we force them to reflect our values. We know that this thing called voting is a power that we have to get people in and out of office to serve us. So we got to start culminating people and galvanizing people together to really fight for issues as it relates to humanity. So
I do have folks that I know of that when I talked about voting or when I talked about simple things as doing a census, they're unfamiliar with it. So I feel like my job as your friend, mentor, or a family member, doesn't matter. My job is to help educate you on things that I've been educated on that I feel as though I'm strongly and passionate about, but also something that can possibly change. Because if you tell me you want change or you want a difference made, then it's like, what can we do? We have so much power. People have died for this power and this type of choice to be made, But for some that say that they won't vote because it doesn't matter or they're unable to, I feel like the ones that say they won't because it doesn't matter, they frustrate me a little bit more versus, the ones that don't know how. Because I can show you or I can help, educate you, but when you just don't do it, just because that frustrates me.
it's very
But what I find really interesting is I've heard so many people say my vote doesn't matter, my vote doesn't matter.
Right.
If you calculate that times 200 people, then you go to another state, you might got like 5,000 people saying the same thing.
Right.
If you add those numbers together, it does matter. Because for every one person that's saying that your vote doesn't matter, you got another 50 or 2,000 or 10,000 people saying the very same thing. And what y'all don't understand is if we come together in numbers, it does matter to make a difference. And I think that's what really frustrates me.
It makes an ultimate
when
impact.
it comes to the election.
Why does that frustrate you if, as you said, and again, I do agree with you that you should go out and vote. Our ancestors died for that, they fought for that. But at the same time, I do believe in freedom and giving everybody a choice. That's what humans are. So why does it frustrate you if another person decides not to use their vote? After all, it is their choice.
Because you're making or breaking a decision.
But
I mean, think about it. We have a commander-in-chief right now who is not for people like us. Let's just say that.
No, he's
He's
not.
not for people like that look like us. But if you had all these people who say, I'm not going to vote because I don't feel like it or I don't have time, if you had people like that will come together and come to the polls because they so-called claim they want to see a change or a difference, then the difference that we want to see would be there right now if we had those people. I'm not saying it's a guarantee, but the chances will be greater if we all came together collectively and made it happen.
To piggyback off of Antoine, I would say that's something that frustrates me. That's the reason it frustrates me is because sometimes you have those same group of people who they are like, I'm tired of doing this. I'm tired of, and I'm so tired. I'm so sick and tired, or I want to see change. Yet, when you speak things into existence as what you want, let actions follow. Don't say, oh, I want something to be changed, or I want to clean my house. I want my room to be clean. I want a new car. But what are you doing to get there? There's no actions to follow.
And no one is trying to take away the next person's freedom, but you're also a part of society. So as a society, I mean, don't we want the best for society? I mean, isn't that the question that we should be asking constantly? Like, what can we do to better ourselves and just better the nation as a whole?
Yeah, but in the terms of like us, and since again, we're all black men here, we somewhat are in the black community, right?
Yes.
In terms of population, we're only 13% at most. Right?
Now, out of that 13%.
Out of that 13%, even if every single one of us vote, let's say 1/3 of the white population, if they vote, they will still outnumber us. So in the sense of somebody coming out and saying, even if we voted, it really doesn't matter. Now, I know what you guys are gonna say. It does matter. Every person's vote matters because of the state and everything that it goes into. But they do make a point in saying that we're such a small percentage. Why does my vote matter?
But you got to understand we're only concentrated on in certain districts. So I mean I get what you're saying, but I mean that's not the whole picture.
What I've seen like in the recent poll is that and it was surprising because it talked about change, like what do people want, and what was known is that 47% of Republicans want major change in democracy right now, and that 80% of Democrats want major change in democracy right now. That's a vast amount of people who just wants change right now in this moment and what they're seeing. So obviously there's something not working for everybody right now in this moment. So the change in leadership is what we know is urgent right now, but also part of being the ally, and like this is the thing that especially in movements that's happening like right now, part of being the ally is not only showing up, but is also the action, as you mentioned, is that 2 months ago when protests started happening, right? You went from millions of people to thousands, and now we're dwindling down to 100. But like now when the March on Washington happened recently, it was millions of people again, right? So like what we gotta stop doing is only showing up when there's publicity attached to it, or when there's a major matter attached to it. So we a part of being an ally is supporting people and their initiatives and the things that are literally dehumanizing us as humans, and like setting us back as individuals. Like we all know as black men, like we're at a disadvantage just from being, like our existence is a scare, right? But even greater when we talk about applying for a job, or we're talking about accessing car insurance, like all of these things that are systematically oppressing us, like are the same things that are setting us back, right? Like the fact is that when I go and apply for car insurance, my rate is likely going to be much more higher than the white man, right? So it's like we got to break down the barriers, and we got to show that these barriers are setting humans back every day, and that's what we got to vote for. Like that's literally what we got to challenge our politicians and people that's leading the realm to talk about.
And especially when it comes to Medicare, I mean, people don't understand that the poor is being taxed the most.
Right.
Like, you have people at a disadvantage who don't make a certain amount of money, but yet you got to pay hundreds of dollars in health insurance, and that's not fair. Because you're trying to pay your rent. That's a whole nother thing. You're barely making ends meet, and you have rent to pay. Some of us have tuition to pay, and it's just really unfair that we're the ones that are affected by it the most. So I would say that for the people, again, who always say my vote doesn't matter, it doesn't count, aren't you tired of working these like low-paying jobs? Don't you want change? Don't you want more money in your pocket? Don't you want a better living situation? So my question again is, why do you not want to take advantage of the opportunity to vote? I understand that it's challenging. I understand that sometimes it's very frustrating. But if you sit home and you do nothing, we'll end up in the same situation that we've been in for the last 4 years.
Well, you know what, too? Some people get comfortable. They get comfortable with the status quo, what they're doing. They get comfortable in that trench hole or whatever it is that they're wallowing in. They get comfortable, and you know what? Some people like comfortability. Some people don't. Me, I don't like comfortability. I like to keep moving and keep expanding, keep evolving. So if I have to poke the hive every once in a while to figure things out for myself, I will. But there won't be a time that I can say that I feel as though I'll become comfortable and do nothing at all for my existence, period. That's just,
but would you be still sitting around complaining if you're not doing nothing? So that's what I'm saying. You can't be out here complaining saying, I'm tired of this and this is just too much. But you're not doing nothing.
But the folks that may complain and things like that, you just have people who just complain. That's all they do. They just complain. It can't get it their way, but like, what are those people contributing to society?
But the problem, I think part of the problem is like there's so much gridlock and polarization happening right now in our nation that like people are even failing just to have basic conversations, right? Where we fall is that like if you're on the other side of the aisle, whether or not you believe in my issue or not, like I'm not going to talk to you because you're Republican. Like that's an automatic shutout for me. That's not my narrative, but like there's many people's narratives, right? It's because you're this, I'm not going to talk to you. And what I've learned just from the power of conversations, right? I had a conversation with someone who was a Republican, and I mentioned to her like, well, what's your thing against the Affordable Care Act or like Medicare for all, right? And she mentions her points, blah, blah, blah. And my thing was where I came back is again, back to humanity, is that why is it a problem for me to walk into an emergency room and not be able to receive treatment just because it's an emergency? Like that's a problem, right? Like now that I have the basic right to walk into an emergency room because of the Affordable Care Act and get treatment, like that's life-saving rather than getting no treatment at all. And that shifted her whole perspective on what the Affordable Care Act was. So like part of where we're falling here is the lack of having conversations and falling away in education, like you mentioned.
Do you think that people are simply afraid to have these conversations? Because again, it's a lot of it is perspective. Like sometimes people don't know like how you might respond, or you know if you're gonna be ready to fight. You know what I'm saying? So I think again we have to really sit down and just try to understand each other a lot better than what we have in the past.
I don't think people are afraid. Some people are afraid, but I think some people are empowered. So when you're living an everyday experience where like where you feel like your life means nothing, and like for you to have the basic right to walk into a hospital is negotiable at a table, like that makes me feel less than as a human, right? So that doesn't empower me to go into a conversation and to have a policy conversation with you. And it's a wealth gap, there's a opportunity gap, but there's an education gap, and that all starts with our school systems. I think everything is evolved around education. Is that like, the fact is like I didn't decide to go to my neighborhood public school because my mom wanted to ensure I had the public policy, the quality of education.
Right.
So she sent me at least 45 minutes away to go to school, right? Not everybody has that right. So the problem is like when we talk about filling out the census and pouring money back into the communities to support this public education system is that like because I live in a low-income community, my education isn't as valued as it is 10 minutes away in the neighborhood where there's no police officers in the school, there's no metal detectors in the school, the education standard is high, they offer AP classes, like all those things matter when we're talking about raising young kids to be adults.
What needs to happen as people head out to the polls? Because I mean, we're at this point where we're about to find out who the next president will be. What do you think people need to keep in mind as they go to the polls and vote? Like what needs to happen to even get people to that point, to the polls?
Well, I think what people need to keep in mind is that this moment is critical. This moment, what's on the ballot is a fight for justice. What's on the ballot is a fight for equity, and a fight for a new generation of a lifestyle that we deserve. Like this moment right now is so critical that it's no longer asking, it's more demanding. And like we've been asking for too long for justice, we've been asking for too long for equity, and people continue to use this word diversity as a buzzword, as in this like you can't talk about diversity without talking about inclusion or equity.
Absolutely.
And it's like if we aren't finding ways to at least set the bar where everyone has the same opportunity as each other, then we aren't propelling Americans. So that's what people need to keep in mind is opportunities and equity when heading into the polls, that I should be able to see the same opportunity as the white man who went to the same school as me, but yet I didn't get the same job as him, right? So that's what people need to keep in mind.
So Jamal, how would you say like, all right, what should I do in this scenario if voting time comes, time to hit the polls, time to do what I need to do? How do I wrangle up a whole gaggle of people who don't feel as though their vote matters or that aren't even sure how to vote? Some people that I found out in my circle aren't even registered to vote. Like, how do I just get everybody, like, get over here kind of thing?
Well, one thing I've learned from this conversation is that you're educated enough and have the tools to pass on that knowledge to someone who may not have it, right? So that's your first step is every way possible how to get to the poll, is empowering other people to know that same tools and techniques that you know. But also like it's really just about showing people that they got opportunity.
Okay.
When a person feels empowered and feel like they have opportunity, then they're ready to go. Like, right, show up with a van, show up with your car and take 3 people with you. Have voting registration letters in your car and have them ready to fill them out. But it's just being a citizen. A part of being a citizen is a part of your duty is to ensure that everybody else feels like they're a citizen too.
Okay.
So like I've seen people rent vans and drive hundreds of people back and forth to the polls.
That's about to be me. What are you doing?
They cheat.
Driving them to the polls.
But yeah, I mean that's what you got to do. Like you know how much is at risk right now, and if you're willing to do everything it takes to make sure that we're on the good side of the stick, then you got to do what you got to do. And if people like Martin Luther King and all of the people like John Lewis can continue to trailblaze for years and years to ensure that we had at least the right to vote. Like I'm gonna at least make sure that I vote, right? Like that's the least that I can do to show homage to their legacy.
Yes. I agree.
What do you feel moving forward, what could happen if Donald Trump is reelected? Like, what's the worst thing that you believe that could happen?
I'm not even gonna think of that because my goal is to get him out of office. But I mean,
Okay, so see y'all, this is why we're telling y'all, like we're trying to get him out. So
I mean,
we need y'all to join us at the polls. Like seriously, we're not joking. I know we laughing a little bit here and there, but we are extremely serious when we tell you guys that he gotta go.
yeah, I mean,
Like
but it's
he gotta go. It's really
like it's not even just like what's the worst thing that can happen. Like what we see is happening right now, it won't change, right? If like we've seen it happen for the past 4 years, we're going to see it happen for a
and
plus
it's
for
getting
more
worse
years.
and worse
Yeah.
and worse. I mean, we in a pandemic right now. A pandemic that honestly should have been out of control. I'm sorry, that should have been controlled before it got out of control.
Yeah.
There's no reason why we should even be where we are right now in this country. It's no reason, it's no excuse whatsoever. I don't think we would be I don't think the pandemic would be this bad. I don't think we would be in a
Millions of people could have died from the Ebola epidemic, but it was the working with other countries to ensure that we were stabilizing and putting out, like we still don't have a treatment. We still don't have a vaccine. There's still no national mandate for people to wear masks. Like there's just inconsistency when it comes, like you can't spread a virus if everybody's wearing a mask and in the house and social distancing.
Right.
Like if we were doing that, then like effectively and properly, then from the beginning, look at countries in Europe in New Zealand where like they've seen no cases in
and
months.
it's becoming like
and they're reopening. So it's like we aren't doing our part as a leading country to show other, like we're literally banned from every country.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like that's a problem.
And then you gotta look at it and understand this, that we in a pandemic and they've okayed us to go back into society, go back to work. Like this virus isn't cured. It's
about money.
Not even under control. It's all about money,
The love of money.
greed, and power. So people, y'all really have to understand what's going on in the world right now. And I think that's what's frustrating to me, is because I keep hearing people say it doesn't matter when. If it don't matter today, I can promise you it's going to be a disaster tomorrow.
Yeah.
So you feel like, it's just a security aspect of it, that we weren't initially prepared, set, and ready to deal with the problems, like with the pandemic.
It wasn't
It wasn't.
It's not even security. I think they knew about this. I think actually it was said that they knew about this
Before.
months
January.
beforehand. It's just
'Cause
simply
like what, December, November? It was like it was
simply
been
they
around for a while.
didn't care. They just didn't
The negligence.
care about their own people. You see different countries like Canada, Australia, or even like states like New York. Look at the New York governor.
New York, it's a 1% chance that you can catch the virus
They
at this point.
really actually care. Like when you looked at it, he really cared about his people. It's just the president we have just don't care. All he cares about is his hotels or his conspiracy theories that they're talking about.
Or getting
now
on Twitter
about-
and arguing with
on
people.
Twitter
Let's
that
not
they're arguing
forget
on
about that,
people,
'cause that's
his
what they do.
fake hair that's in his head.
All
But
of
it's
it.
just simple fact that the current government we have now just does not care about its people, and the fact that America has become a laughing stock in the world, and he just sits back and he just wallows in his whatever he eats, his hot dog and hamburgers, and it frustrates me because I've seen a lot of people just lose their job. I've seen a couple of trainers, boxing trainers, just had to go back home. And all of this happened, and he just sits there and he's like, "Oh, there's no virus."
Not only that they've only lost their jobs, but it's people who can't pay rent. It's
Exactly.
people, the unemployment is running out, and they don't know where they're gonna get their next meal from. They just don't know, and they're sitting there, and every day it's a struggle. And we shouldn't be living under these conditions.
There's
This is
also
America.
There's also racism that exists when it comes to dealing with this virus too, right? Is that this virus has exposed us to, not even exposed, it has enlightened us to many issues, and has put many issues on the map that has been going on for years. But not only that, like the fact is, if you're more prone to get the virus if you're black or brown, right? And what's the worst part about that is, if I do get the virus, as if I'm black and brown, is that it takes me 2 weeks to get back my results, right? So by that time, the ability to contact trace and to serve the need, like we're done.
And,
right?
and Jamal, not to cut you off, but can you explain to the people briefly why black people, why we are more prone to catch the virus? Because I don't think a lot of people understand why we're catching it at a faster pace and rate than others.
There's many factors, and it's from affordable housing to black families living in food deserts where we don't have access to healthy foods.
A lot of us
to working in environments where our job quality and everything else doesn't give us the opportunity to excel economically. Like there's many factors, and black people, most black communities are communities that are I can't think of the word, but that are packed together, right? And it's like when you're bringing virus back to the community, but yeah, I can't go to a hospital in my neighborhood because there is no hospital in my neighborhood, or there's probably like one testing center in my neighborhood, and I have to wait 2 hours in order to get at least tested for it, and then wait another 2 weeks. Like that's why it's spreading, because we can't catch the virus. We can't catch where the virus is if we aren't doing our job as a government to really track and see where it is, right? Okay. So like, if you contact the virus and 2 weeks later, that's the amount of time they tell you to quarantine. So by that time, you probably done spread it already before you've known about it to like 12 other people, and then we're not contact tracing very well right now. So.
And then you also got to remember, some of us show symptoms and some of us don't.
Right.
So I could be walking around with it and don't even know I have it because I'm still healthy, while you could show every symptom in the book.
Right.
See, about that, not to interrupt you, but it's like, they say, of course, respiratory issues, you're not able to breathe or things of that sort. Having asthma, I grew up not being able to breathe at a full capacity anyway. So yes, I've been tested and I've been negative, but however, the folks that are saying, or the studies that are showing about your respiratory issues, to me, it's like, that's been my whole life.
Yeah.
I've not been able to breathe like regular people because I have asthma. I have a machine, I do the whole nebulizer and all that, respirator, whatever you want to call it. I do all that already. So in my for me, it's like the folks that are unfortunate enough to actually contract this disease, it's like, how, if they aren't being contact traced and things like that, in that case, it's like, all right, well, if you have asthma, if you have other underlying issues that, may have bothered you before, you're just going to do your machine, you're going to do whatever you're doing, and in 2 weeks, hope you're better, because we don't have enough medical centers around to help us. So then at that point, everybody else who doesn't have asthma, they're suffering at a bad rate or sadly perishing. They can't breathe. And so what do you, like,
again, it just takes
it goes like this,
It
right?
brings me back to what we talked about at the very top of this conversation. And it says it on the shirt: register, show up, and please vote, y'all. Like, I know I've been saying it multiple times, and I'm gonna say it again: register, show up, and vote. Because we are, like I said, it's life or death at this point. If you want to live, and if you want the best, or the best that you can get, you got to get Donald Trump out of the White House. It's just, that is what it is. Before we end this segment, what is it that we can tell people to influence them to go out and vote? Like, what else can we tell them? I'm just trying to think of every little thing that we can say to just get people up out their chairs and out to the polls.
Yeah, I think we covered a lot in this conversation, but it is really back to my saying about putting people over party. Is that we got to stop valuing who's a Democrat and who's a Republican or who's an independent, and valuing people and their livelihoods and their experiences. Is that I should be propelled to go out and vote when my livelihood isn't the state that I wanted to be in, where my livelihood is a scare. Like those are things that we have to start thinking about at the polls. And if there are people who represent us in office right now who isn't meeting those needs, then we vote them out. And that's what the vote, and that's why it's underlined here.
Yes.
Like that's ultimately that's the representation that we're gonna get based on where we vote. So it's a fight. It's a fight that we all got to be together.
We all got to stick together, and we got to fight that good fight. So let's do it, y'all. Let's show up at these polls and let's turn numbers out. Let's show up and show out, because if we don't, it's gonna be terrifying. That's really all I can tell y'all. I want to personally thank you, Jamal, for coming through and just really educating everyone on the importance of voting.
Thank you.
And why we have to do it, why it's not really an option. It should be a requirement at this point. Thanks for just taking time out of your day to just influence positivity. I appreciate that.
I thank you. And if I can say one more point,
Sure.
is that there's a huge inequality that exists when it comes to voting day alone, is that it's not a national holiday to where many families who are working restaurant jobs or working just blue collar jobs won't get the opportunity to take off work, right? And oftentimes when it's time to get off work, the polls are closed. So I empower everyone to consider every option possible in your city and state to think about what voting is, whether that's early voting, whether that's mail-in voting, whether that's voting in person and just facing the fact that you may have to stand in line for some hours, but it's like just not giving up on any option. So like your vote matters, and that there has to be a way for you to vote, and keep figuring out what those ways are until it fits you.
And think about this, if you're undecided about going to the polls to vote, think about this. This affects not only you, but it affects your mother, your father, your brother, your sister, your kids, your spouse. It affects those in and around you. So it's not just something that affects you individually. So please, please, please keep that in mind.
That's right.
Get up, get out and vote. It's on the shirt. All four of us got the shirts out. And if you can read and you can write, you can get up and you can go vote. So register, show up, and vote, people.
Yes.
Don't act like you don't know what time it is. It's 2020. 2020 has been a very trying year for all of us.
Yeah.
Very trying, very challenging. We ain't trying to see another 2020. At least I'm not.
Nope.
I know y'all not either. So let's get up and let's make a difference. You know what to do. Let's make history.